Welcome to MaseroGarage. Today, Emily is going to show you how to refinish an old piece of trim that looked terrible from our 1977 Chevrolet Nova.
Since we haven't refinished any of the trim off of our car before, we figured we'd start small because it'd be such a shame to refinish all of the trim of the car and not like the final product. So we're going to start small with the seat hinge covers from the front bench. So stick around to find out how to turn something that once looked like garbage into something that looks nice and new. I'm going to get started with these plastic trim pieces. They look like at some point that they had been refinished pretty poorly. They were originally red, someone painted them black, they're really scratched, and hopefully when we do it, it's going to turn out better. I think we determined that these are off a 74 to 76 or 7 Malibu or El Camino bench, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start out by sanding these thoroughly. I'm going to start out with 100 grit sandpaper and progressively move to a finer grit, just trying to rough up the surface so that the paint and primer will adhere better and hopefully not turn out like they had looked before when the previous owner tried to refinish them. Ew, look at the difference between the two. Really makes a big difference, all the sanding. After finishing both of them, I am moving on to 150 grit sandpaper, and I will repeat the same process. Done with the 150 grit on both. Now I am moving on to 240. This will be my last round of sanding, and then we can move on to cleaning and paint and primer. Woohoo! The worst part of this project is over. No more sanding for these trim pieces. Only have the rest of the car to go. Now we're going to move on to cleaning. I am going to use the Rust-Oleum Paint Prep Wipe. I picked this up because we were at Walmart and it was $1 and I just wanted to try it out. Now it probably won't be very practical to use one of these for every single part of the trim for the car because there's just so much trim, and it would just be more fiscally responsible to get a bottle of degreaser and cleaner to clean all the surfaces. But this will work for now, and it seems to be working pretty well. See, they look pretty darn clean. Moving on to primer, I'm going to be using the Rust-Oleum Filler and Sandable Primer. For paint, I'm going to be using Rust-Oleum Flat Black Acrylic Enamel. And for the top coat, I'm going to be using acrylic enamel, also by Rust-Oleum, and a clear gloss. Hopefully it turns out looking like new. So the instructions for the primer say to hold about 12 to 16 inches away from the surface you're painting, keeping constant motion. And before you get started, you must shake the can thoroughly. Here I've propped up the little trim pieces so that when the paint dries, it's not stuck to the cardboard, because that would be super freaking annoying. I am beginning on the first coat of the primer. I'm trying to keep motion and distance with each stroke of the spray paint. Done with the first coat of primer. I am moving on to the second coat after waiting a few minutes, because that's what the can says. And I think that's good for the primer. The can says 2 or more coats, but after 2 coats, I'm pretty satisfied. So I'm going to leave this to harden for at least 2 hours and come back and check on them. And we're back. It's been about 2.5 hours, and as you can see, it is now dark at 6 something because of winter nights in Georgia, which is just great for painting and sanding and all these things. You know, light, not important at all. Anyway, the primer is dry and it's looking pretty good. I'm going to hit it with some sandpaper to smooth out any imperfections and just make sure that there's a nice clean and smooth surface for the paint to adhere to. I'm going to start with an 800 grit sandpaper and see how it's looking after that. Okay, so reading the instructions on this one, it is essentially the same thing as the primer. The only difference that I can see is that it says to hold the can 10 to 16 inches as opposed to 12 to 16 inches away from the item that you're painting. But other than that, same spiel. Go ahead and give it a good shake. Here we go. Black paint going on in 3, 2, 1. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to try to maintain the same thing that I did before with the primer. I'm going to keep a good distance, keep constant motion with the spray can, and hopefully it turns out good. First coat of the black enamel paint done, and it's looking pretty good. Not too terribly even, but I'm not worried because it's the first coat. It's also looking pretty shiny, but I assume that it will turn more matte as it dries. I will leave this for an hour and be back to check on it soon. First coat looks great, and here I go for the second coat. Side note, I know it would probably be a better idea to finish this when it's light outside, but I am hella determined to get this done today. So I am doing what I can with the amount of light that I can, and hopefully I finish by the end of the day. It's been about an hour since the second coat, and we are here inspecting it. Sergio seems to approve, so that's good. I'm going to go ahead and start with the top coat. So the directions on this are exactly the same as the one for the black enamel paint. So I'm not going to repeat myself again. If you need to read it, then pause the video and read it for yourself. Clear coat is done. I am going to wait for this to dry to decide whether or not I add another coat on top of this or just leave it as is. And here they are. Now that it's daylight outside, you can really see how well they turned out. The clear coat looks great, and we're both really happy with how the finish looks. We think that it looks so good that we're confident that it's going to work for all of the trim in the car. Just imagine these mounted here onto the bench. I think they'll look great. I'm not going to mount them for two pretty obvious reasons. One being that we still have to reupholster this front bench. Two being that the can of spray paint says that on hard plastics, the clear coat typically takes 5 to 7 days to harden, so I wouldn't want to install anything that's freshly painted until it's really had the appropriate amount of time to solidify. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you learned a few things and that you might now have the confidence to restore any old piece of trim that you might have from your vehicle. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button down below for more content.
And if you'd like to learn more about the restoration on the 77 Nova, please subscribe to our channel.